Default. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon.
I have a dream.
Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Help is on the way.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
Let me be really clear on this. We will not take up a bill in the House until the Senate passes the bipartisan bill and a reconciliation bill. Make sure you understand this. That when people say, well, I'm not going to vote for this unless I see that, there ain't going to be no bipartisan bill unless we are going to have the reconciliation.
Oh! Holy crap. A lot of stuff happened this morning. A lot of stuff, everybody. They're getting ready to go home, and they need something to tell you that they did, and that includes Republicans. Yes, they can't just sit there and bitch about CRT, okay, that isn't taught in school. So they have to go home and show something. So today there's been an agreement between the White House, the Democrats in Congress, and the Republicans also for an infrastructure package. It is a fraction of what we need to be invested in us. It is a fraction, but it's something, right? So this is what happened. Oh God, so much happened this morning. So the infrastructure package is big, and I'll go through the points that are in the bipartisan package, a fraction of what needs to be done. The other thing that needs to be done, that the family plan that Joe Biden has with a big price tag on it, that will go through reconciliation, we now know. So we can pass that with 51 votes. We don't need any stinking senators to agree to help us pay for child care, elder care, to expand broadband, et cetera, okay? And Joe Biden just finished up a press conference where he announced that neither bill, the reconciliation bill or the bipartisan package, will get his signature unless they both arrive on his desk at the same time, and he will sign them both. Otherwise, nothing gets signed. Kind of smart, kind of good. All right, so we'll go through that. But then also this morning, this little, gem of a piece of information dropped about Rudy Giuliani. His law license has been temporarily suspended pending a hearing about his activities, not just in public, no, but yes, in front of courts. Seems that Rudy Giuliani has lied to courts, has lied to lawmakers, and has lied to the public at large in his capacity as lawyer for former President Donald J. Trump. And in concert with, connection with, in conspiracy with Donald Trump's failed effort at the re-election of 2020, which indicates that Rudy Giuliani is indeed being investigated into trolling around Ukraine for dirt on Hunter Biden. He's in a lot of trouble, Rudy Giuliani. So that happened this morning also. And on top of it, Nancy Pelosi announced, and this was in the homework yesterday and the day before, I believe, so that you could follow this, because it was follow the bouncing ball is what it was. At first, I believe it was Monday. What's today? Thursday? So maybe Tuesday. They all blend when stuff happens real fast. That Nancy Pelosi was indicating she would set up a House Select Committee to investigate the whys and wherefores, and also how to protect the Capitol going forward after the January 6th insurrection. Well, at first we got a report that said, I believe it was Tuesday night, that said that Nancy Pelosi indicated that she unfortunately had no choice but to set up a select committee in the House, because obviously in the Senate, the bipartisan commission that passed the House, okay, the bipartisan independent commission idea went down in flames on a partisan Republican no vote, right? And so Tuesday night we heard that she was going to set up a House Select Committee with subpoena power to investigate what happened. Like, what were the causes? Who was riling them up? What were the financials? Who paid for the buses? Who paid for this? Who paid for that? You know what I'm saying? And so, and then also the security piece of the investigation. What steps can we take to make sure this never happens again? And then Wednesday, I believe Wednesday morning or right after, I don't know. Oh, we got a report that she said that was incorrect reporting, that somebody leaked that is not true. She's not doing it. And then today, she said, well, unfortunately, I am going to set it up.
This morning, with great solemnity and sadness, I'm announcing that the House will be establishing a select committee on the January 6th insurrection. Again, January 6th was one of the darkest days in our nation's history. I've said it now 3 times. It is imperative that we establish the truth of that day and ensure that an attack of that kind cannot happen, and that we root out the causes of it all. The Select Committee will investigate and report on the facts and the causes of the attack, and it will report recommendations for the prevention of any future attack.
Okay, so this is all positive. This is all moving forward. This is all fact-finding. This is all, investing in America. And yesterday, Joe Biden also had a press conference. I mean, this is there's so much going on right now that it's almost impossible to believe this is America. It's actually Infrastructure Week, and infrastructure is actually getting agreed to. It's actually time to investigate January 6th, and it's only June. Okay, it's only 6 months later. And that's going to happen. It was actually time for Rudy Giuliani to lose his law license, and that has actually happened. And yesterday, we actually had a press conference featuring the President of the United States, Joe Biden, actually talking about actual policy and actual initiatives to combat gun crime in this here country, with concrete explanations and plans that did not include gun grabbing, which is all Republicans leave you to believe is to be done. You know, the reason why crime went through the roof, they give you a general explanation in the mainstream media. I don't know why they don't actually experience, explain to people what really went on during the pandemic that Donald Trump failed miserably to contain. Miserably failed. Just insanely failed, then denied it was even going on, then offered miracle cures like lightsabers and drink bleach and stuff like that, and then hydroxychloroquine, and it will just go away, finally, is what he settled on. It will just go away. But people don't want to talk about what the effect was of courts being closed. And yes, courts were not operating. We were actually in the midst of a global pandemic that hit us so freaking hard that we didn't have courts operating. Also, you had mentorship programs end, stop meeting, no ability. You had people shedding jobs instead of, preserving jobs, especially in frontline, customer-facing industries, which keep kids off the street. You had churches that also offer mentorship programs and safe spaces for people to gather and talk about whatever. Those were closed to the public. You had people literally being released from prison with no services available. What did you think was going to happen in that case? No place to work, no churches to go to, no courts to hear cases, no mentorship programs. So, of course, we ended up with, violent crime increasing, gun crime increasing. So yesterday, Biden had this very long discussion of his policy, which, by the way, I copied and pasted from his website into the homework today. It is a very comprehensive anti-crime initiative. It involves all these things that I'm talking to you about, because Joe Biden has worked for 30 years on the issue of crime and knows what doesn't work very well and what does.
all things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Look, the bipartisan bill from the very beginning was understood there's going to have to be the second part of it. I'm not just signing the bipartisan bill and forgetting about the rest that I proposed. I proposed a significant piece of legislation in 3 parts. And all 3 parts are equally important. And by the way, my party, everybody tells me what my party is. My party's divided. Well, my party is divided. My party's divided, but my party is also rational. If they can't get every single thing they want, but all that they have in the bill that before them is good, are they going to vote no? I don't think so.
He's very confident, I have to say. This bipartisan package that was negotiated late last night, Nancy Pelosi actually showed up this morning and said, okay, that's all well and good, because this is $953 billion. That's the bipartisan package, $953 billion. What the total proposal looks to me to add up to is about $4 trillion, okay? And so what Joe Biden is saying there is, okay, here's the deal. I am only going to sign the bipartisan package if and when the $3 trillion that I propose for elder care, that I propose for K through pre-K, not daycare, not just daycare, but pre-K, okay, and daycare and elder care and all of the things that families need to be part of the workforce. If I don't get that through the reconciliation process, I'm not signing the $953 billion bipartisan package. So that's what Nancy Pelosi went forward to say this morning. And I was shocked, I tell you, to hear that Biden agrees with it. And that Biden said, don't worry. I'm not signing one without the other. It's going to happen in tandem. It's going to be a 2-track process, and neither will get signed by me until both are passed. Now, Nancy Pelosi is saying the House isn't even going to take up anything at all to do with the bipartisan package or the reconciliation package until the Senate concludes its work. Because the House has done so much heavy lifting on so many bills. They have taken so many votes. They've taken votes on a 9/11, on a January 6th independent commission. They've taken votes on infrastructure packages. They've taken votes on election protection. They've taken, you name it, they've taken a tough vote, okay? A tough vote. And then it goes to the Senate to die. And she is right to say, we're not going to do anything until the Senate finishes its work and sends it to us. And then we'll take a vote on what's in the Senate's bill. Because this is getting ridiculous. We're working our tails off over here, only to watch it go, ooh, over there where Joe Manchin pitches a fit, or Kristen Sinema says, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I mean, I want to be bipartisan, so I'll write an op-ed saying democracy is subordinate to a rule in the Senate that was invented by mistake in the 1800s. By mistake, because they forgot to put in their documents in the 1800s how to end debate. Seriously, that's how the filibuster came to be. And then it got used for the most racist crap in the history of the United States, like civil rights. So anyway, this is smart. This is good. And he keeps, the whole press was out. Are you sure that's what you're going to do? You're not going to sign anything until you get both of them.
I expect that in the coming months this summer, before the fiscal year is over, that we will have voted on this bill, as well, the infrastructure bill, as well as voted on the budget resolution. And that's when but if only one comes to me, I'm not, if this is the only thing that comes to me, I'm not signing it.
I'm not signing it. So everybody's sitting there wondering, what can Biden do? What can Biden do? Well, there's one. Not sign it. There's one. Now, under this bipartisan plan, just so you know, $312 billion goes to transportation projects. $65 billion goes to broadband, $55 billion to waterways, $47 billion for resilience, which is a down payment on things that are happening as an impact of climate change. The Republicans wanted to raise taxes in a stealthy way on working people because their idea was to raise the gas tax. And Joe Biden had promised that no one making less than $400,000 a year would see an increase in their taxes, any taxes, not Social Security taxes, not gas taxes, okay? And so he rejected it, and now they've decided that they will spend $40 billion in investing in the Internal Revenue Service Enforcement Bureau. They think that if they enforce the laws we already have, we would see $100 billion new dollars collected in revenue, and a separate infrastructure finance program will borrow money. It will leverage $20 billion in federal money, and it will turn the $20 billion into $180 billion in private financing on infrastructure. I am really against that. I just want you to know I'm really against that. Whenever you hear a public-private partnership, understand they're selling your roads and bridges. They sold your parking meters. Yeah. So big cities sold parking meters to private companies. And those private companies now actually charge cities on holidays when the cities are closed for a holiday. They make the city pay them for the lost revenue in parking fees that they would collect. It's just a ridiculous scam on American people. But that is what the smaller part of the bill includes. That's what the Republicans agreed to, because they will never, ever raise taxes on their donor class. They will never raise taxes on hedge funds. That part of it is going to get done through the reconciliation process. That is what he's calling the budgetary process. That all the increase in corporate taxes from what was proposed was 21% now. Corporate taxes are 21%. Listen, if you're self-employed, you pay almost 30% in income in tax. But, okay. And we all know capital gains, money making money, is taxed at a lower rate than labor is taxed. The whole thing is ridiculous. So the reconciliation bill will deal with the corporate taxes. It will deal with raising them. Now, what's proposed is from 21% to 28%. We'll see how far Joe Manchin is willing to go on reconciliation, okay? Because we're going to need all 50 votes, which is why this became problematic in the first place. But a win is a win, and if we get both these infrastructure bills passed, one by reconciliation, all Democrats, and the other one in a bipartisan manner, Joe Biden gets to declare victory, and so does American infrastructure.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844.
561-270-3844.
So Biden was asked, how could you believe anything Republicans say when they lie so much?
I work with a lot of these people who are in the room. I know them. Everybody knows, and you guys know. When certain senators tell you something, they mean it. And others you discount.
Huh.
Where I come from, in my years in the Senate, the single greatest currency you have is your word, keeping your word. Mitt Romney's never broken his word to me. The senator from Alaska and the senator from New Hampshire, they've never broken their word. I'm from Maine. They've never broken their word from their friends. And so the people I was with today are people that I trust. I don't agree with them on a lot of things, but I trust them when they say, this is a deal. We'll stick to the deal. Just like I doubt whether you'll find any one of them say they don't trust me when I said, okay, this is the deal on these issues. This is the deal we'll stick with. But for example, and I made it clear today, there's other things in the environment I want to get done. I think we should have the $300 billion tax credit for dealing with the environment. It will be a giant tax cuts for corporations, but it'll also be a giant move toward weatherizing every building in America and all the things we need to do. So there's things, and so when I said we agree, I'm not going to go back and renegotiate the Amtrak piece, but I am going to fight for trying to get $300 billion more for tax credits for the environment. That's about the best that I can answer the question.
So he trusts Mitt Romney, Susan Collins, and Lisa Murkowski is what he said there. And then there are other people whose words must be discounted. I'm guessing Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana might be one of those. Yeah, I'm guessing that. You know, this is really amazing. Okay, so let's rewind to yesterday. Yesterday, Biden put forward his anti-crime initiative, okay? And it includes things that the American people are overwhelmingly for. Background checks, okay? Enforcement of our laws. You know, the NRA will always stand there and say, why don't you just enforce the laws that we already have? That's exactly what he proposed to do yesterday. Background checks, closing the gun show loophole, right? All these things. It was a very basic, very easy to understand proposal that Biden was making yesterday. Okay, I'll just play you the background check portion.
You know that if there is a strict enforcement of background checks, then fewer guns get into the hands of criminals. Background checks have thus far kept more than 3 million guns out of the hands of felons, convicted felons, fugitive, domestic abusers, and others prohibited from being able to purchase a gun. It's zero tolerance for gun dealers who willfully violate key existing laws and regulations. Let me repeat, zero tolerance. If you willfully sell a gun to someone who's prohibited from possessing it, if you willfully fail to run a background check, if you willfully falsify a record, if you willfully fail to cooperate with the tracing requests or inspections, my message to you is this: we'll find you, and we will seek your license to sell guns. We'll make sure you can't sell death and mayhem on our streets. It's an outrage. It has to end, and we'll end it.
Okay, so that was the major portion of Joe Biden's proposal on guns, on the gun portion of the crime, okay? Here was Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana's response.
We're going to have to do what Mayor Giuliani and Mayor Bloomberg did in New York City, and we're going to have to do it in all the major crime areas. We're going to have to bring back stop, question, and frisk, and apply it in a racially neutral manner. It is perfectly legal. It has been used for years. Chief Justice Earl Warren wrote the opinion in 1968, a case called Terry v. Ohio, that says it is perfectly legal to stop, question, and frisk if you do it in a racially neutral manner. And until we do this business of the confusion from the press conference and this business of background checks, and it's just drivel.
No, we don't want no background checks to keep guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them. We want stop and frisk. Stop and frisk. He goes back to a court ruling in the 60s. Stop and frisk. Stop and frisk. Where have we heard that? Oh, that's right. Mayor Giuliani, who just lost his law license today. Yeah, he was the person who started stop and frisk. I will say Michael Bloomberg continued it and made it even worse.
A federal judge ruled the NYPD tactic of stop and frisk unconstitutional today. Judge Shira Scheindlin stated the practice violates minorities' constitutional rights because it relies on racial profiling.
Oh.
The policy, which allows police officers to stop, approach, question, and search people on the street, has been targeted by protest groups around the city, who claim that they are unfairly being targeted based on skin color. In her ruling, Judge Scheindlin stated the practice violated the Fourth Amendment involving unfair searches and seizures, and the 14th Amendment guaranteeing equal protection under the law.
Oh, you forgot about
Mayor
that.
Bloomberg came out against the ruling and vowed to appeal the decision. He credits stop and frisk for saving thousands of lives when guns are removed from the street.
Throughout the case, we didn't believe that we were getting a fair trial, and this decision confirms that suspicion, and we will be presenting evidence of that unfairness to the appeals court.
Oh, so what happened to that? What happened to the appeals? What happened to the appeals?
In January of 2014, New York City's newly elected mayor, Bill de Blasio, announced the city would drop its appeal of a ruling by a U.S. district court that found the controversial policy of stop and frisk unconstitutional, and he would settle an ongoing lawsuit. Mayor de Blasio delivered the news at a community center in Brownsville, Brooklyn, a predominantly African-American neighborhood that's had more stop and frisk than any other part of the city.
Interesting.
We believe in ending the overuse of stop and frisk that has unfairly targeted young African American and Latino men. We believe in our obligation, the most fundamental one that there is in government, to keep people safe. And the values and strategies that keep people safe and that really give us lasting safety, those values are not compatible with a broken and misused stop and frisk policy.
So the appeal was dropped. A lawsuit was settled when Bill de Blasio took over after Mayor Bloomberg. So let's ask Judge Shira Scheinlein, who ruled it was unconstitutional, whether or not crime increased in New York City when stop and frisk was repealed. Answer: no, it didn't go up. In fact, it came down significantly. Why? Because about 94% of the stop, question, and frisk profiling produced nothing actionable. No further police effort was necessary after the stop, question, and frisk. They were doing it to innocent people based on where they lived, based on their zip code, based on their skin color. See what I mean? So if we listen to the senator from Louisiana who doesn't want to do background checks, which 98% of Americans, including gun owners, are for, and we go back to what he says is constitutional but isn't, stop and frisk, then we're all black now, everybody.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
Okay, this is the federal judge, Shira Scheinlein, who found that stop and frisk was indeed unconstitutional. And what happened after her decision?
First of all, it was the most important decision I wrote in all those years. It was a very, very major case because it affected the lives of so many hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers. And I put many years into that case and studied the problem deeply. And what was very satisfying about that case is that I found the stop and frisk effort as practiced was unconstitutional. In other words, you can make stops and frisks, but only if you do it in accordance with the Constitution. A lot of people misunderstood the ruling. I didn't say you can't do it, but you have to do it constitutionally. And it was not being done constitutionally, in my view. It was done with racial profiling. So hundreds of thousands of young black men, as you said, were stopped, and it's a big thing to be stopped and frisked. We don't realize it because we're not likely. I'm not likely, and probably neither of you are likely to be stopped or frisked. But it's a real intrusion, and it often goes bad. When you think of the young black men who've been shot, it's because a stop went bad. So it's a dangerous thing to be stopped, and you can often end up with an arrest. Anyway, the good news was the stops dropped by 97% as a result of my ruling. So it went down from 700,000 to less than 50,000 with no rise in crime. And that was satisfying because had crime gone shooting up, as the then mayor and then police commissioner predicted, people would have said, it's your fault. This city has burnt up and it's your fault. But it didn't happen that way.
That's right. It did not. And they stopped 97% of those random stop. And there was no further police action required when police were stopping young black men, targeting them based on the fact that they were young black men. Crime did not go up. Crime, violent crime, gun crime is up all over this country now, not because we've ended stop and frisk, which we've ended. It's been gone for a number of years now. That case took 10 years, by the way. That's how long the law takes, okay? speaking of critical race theory, see what I mean? Things that are codified in law could actually end up having a negative impact on citizens of color. You see how that could be, but we don't want to study that. Anyway, took 10 years to right that wrong, and crime did not go up after the end of stop and frisk in the first, second, third, fourth, or fifth year. It went up recently because courts are closed. It went up recently because churches were closed. It went up recently because mentoring programs had to shut their doors, because jobs were shed, okay? Because of all the things, summer programs, summer jobs, schools, tutoring on simple things like algebra that tend to stymie a kid. I know that's why I didn't go to colleges, because I just could not get through statistics or geometry. I just couldn't do it. Now, if I would have had a mentoring program, I don't know, maybe I would have gone all the way and gotten to law school, where I may have voluntarily taken a class in how bad laws disproportionately affect people of color. Maybe I would have. Do you see what I mean? And so anyway, I just wanted to cover that ground because I want to show you what we have serving in the United States Senate. These lying sacks of dung who are absolutely 100% willing to lie to the American people that background checks are drivel, and that what we really need to go back and do is racially profile young black men, because the gun activity that's increasing in this country seems to be driven by an underground railroad of illegal weapons ending up in the hands of young black men. All right, this pains me to play because Bill Bratton is not, one of my favorite people, but he was the former New York police commissioner, and he has been interviewed lately on various networks about what is going on with the increase in gun crime.
Clearly, the prevalence of guns in the hands of too many young people that really have no control in their lives. A lot of these killings and shootings are gang-related in New York City. A lot of them are over foolishness, basically. The idea of the coronavirus influence also cannot be underestimated. Effectively, the criminal justice system in the United States shut down for a year. No trials, people arrested, released on bail, and back out of the streets again. There's so many factors involved, and it really does require a little more study going forward. I celebrate the president's announcement later today. I've had a chance to review his press announcement this morning, and there's a lot in that. It's probably the most comprehensive initiative since the 1994 crime bill.
Okay, so that's former New York police commissioner. In fact, he's been police commissioner elsewhere, Bill Bratton, telling you courts were closed. Courts were closed. Nothing could go. People were just released. And you have kids wandering all over the street with absolutely no oversight, no programs, no school. That ought to do it. And he said when he looked at Joe Biden's anti-crime initiative, he liked it. He thought it was very comprehensive. There are a lot of things in there, aside from banning weapons, which is what Republicans always want you to believe the false choice is. Either you live with crime and you let the police beat up random people, you let the police stop whoever they feel like stopping for whatever reason they felt like it, you let police racially profile, you give them permission to do it. People start to distrust the police to the point where they don't even call the police anymore for help, because they think that if they do, they're going to end up dead anyway. And you end up with a system that is completely shattered. Add to that, no courts, no schools, no churches, no mentorship programs, no tutoring program, nothing. And this is what it looks like. Now, while I'll tell you that gun crime is increasing, it's nowhere near what it was in the 90s. One of the things that we did do in the 90s in that crime bill, and we did a lot of really bad things in that crime bill, like the disparity between sentencing. We went over this yesterday between crack cocaine and powder. It was called the 100-to-1 ratio, where if you had 500 grams of powder cocaine, 5 years. But if you had 5 grams of crack, 5 years. Yeah, that didn't work. And Joe Biden, in his anti-crime initiative, actually gets rid of the disparity in sentencing for many things. Many things. He also insists that for nonviolent things like, the private companies that we sold parking meters, they get to now jail you for, if you fail to pay parking tickets, you can go to jail in this country. Yeah, well, Joe Biden says, no, I'm not in the mood to put people in jail for parking tickets. Now, why did that happen? Again, it's part of the private-public partnership program that never works for the public. Prisons, for profit. Parking tickets, for profit, equals enforcing parking tickets by imprisoning people in private prisons. What could go wrong there? See what I mean? There's so many things that start at the very beginning, like at the concept idea, that when you roll with the concept for a little while, you go, oh, that was a bad idea. Well, this is the nice thing about Joe Biden. Joe Biden was part of, in fact, he was the major driving force behind the 1994 crime bill. But Joe Biden has actually looked at the concepts that were enshrined in our law, sort of a critical race look at the laws, and concluded that a lot of them had the opposite effect of what they could have been. And he does away with them in this crime initiative. Isn't that special? Oh my God, the ability to say, I was wrong. The one thing he was not wrong on and still agrees with that was in that crime bill, there was a ban on assault weapons. Yeah, there was. There was a 10-year ban on assault weapons. No hunter, no marksman, no sportsman needs a magazine that fires 100 rounds. Okay? It's just not necessary unless you're going to come upon 100 deer and you need to kill them all. Okay? So, with guys like Senator John Kennedy, no chance of passing. None.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon.
I have a dream.
Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Help is on the way.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
Here is the truth. Racism exists in America. Xenophobia exists in America. Anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, homophobia, transphobia, it all exists. And so the work to address injustice, wherever it exists, remains the work ahead.
That did not take long. No, because telling the truth just takes 2 seconds. It takes a lifetime to lie. And that is how you know that this whole lie that has been built and fortified by the likes of one white supremacist, Steve Bannon, in tandem with the Heritage Foundation, Heritage Action, just psychos out there who are looking for the new issue to spawn outrage and division and hatred, have settled on critical race theory, which is not taught to K through 12 It's not taught to colleges. It's taught in law schools. It's a grad course. It's a voluntary grad course. You can study it at West Point voluntarily. You can, if you choose to, actually take a course on discriminatory laws and their effect on people of color at West Point. This just outrages Laura Ingraham and Steve Bannon and this lunatic fringy guy who used to work in the Trump administration. All of them actually are ex-Trump administration, hate to use the word officials, but all of them, Chris Rufo and Ian Pryor, these are all names that you will become literate in as the 2022 cycle of midterms begins. Because they've been looking for the new Tea Party. They've been looking for the new Obamacare. And they have decided critical race theory is it. Now, those of you who are constant clients, constant listeners, you know critical race theory is a 40-year-old study of law in the United States that focuses on the disproportionate or the beneficial effect that laws have had on people of color, indigenous people. Now it actually includes sexual orientation as well in the study of discrimination enshrined in law. Now, you can't make that up and you can't create it. Either it was a law or it wasn't. Either it's history or it isn't. Either it happened or it didn't. You can't pick and choose laws that you don't want to believe existed. You can't pick and choose history. You can't pick and choose truth. You can't pick and choose your news. It either happened or it didn't. Steve Bannon said out loud, "This is the Tea Party to the 10th power." Meaning we need to appeal to suburban women who forsook us in the last election. You know, there was a charge for the door. I mean, women were leaving skid marks. That's how fast we were running away from Donald Trump and white supremacy and a lunatic fringe crowd of the most disrespectful, violent, white supremacist, anti-Semitic group of people. Well, Steve Bannon decided that he was going to say that their children, they needed to come back to the Republican Party because their children were being taught to hate themselves. Their children were being taught that they were responsible for racism in America. And that has nothing to do with a grad course in law that looks at laws that really existed, some that still do, like the disparity between sentencing for crack cocaine and powder cocaine. See what I mean? Centuries of slavery and Jim Crow and Reconstruction and, redlining and, the war on drugs and, listen, I would include, I don't even know if it does because I've never taken the course. Know why? Never went to law school. But I would include the Vietnam draft because the Vietnam draft was made up of poor people. Poor people. Disproportionately African American 19-year-olds. Just saying. Anyway, they now are deciding that they're going to lie and tell people that their children are being taught that racism is their fault. They need to hate themselves for being whatever it is they are. I'm so sorry. And they're doing it in an effort to win over suburban women. That's why they went to the school boards. That's why Ian Pryor and Chris Rufo and all these activists who work for Heritage Foundation, they work for American Crossroads, Heritage Action Foundation. They are capitalizing on this lie in order to just literally create capital, fundraise, and also to agitate, to outrage, and to force suburban women back into the loving grip of the freaking racist GOP. That's why Fox News in the last 3.5 months has talked about critical race theory 1,300 times. In just a little over 100 days, they have talked about critical race theory 1,300 times. Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida has been very active on banning the teaching, which isn't taught anywhere in K through 12 in this here state or any other that I know of, banning the teaching of critical race theory, a graduate level course to fourth graders. He actually wrote it down and banned it. And now he's got a new idea. Now he wants to he wrote this into the law yesterday, it passed. They're going to do a survey of college students, not graduate students, college students across Florida, and college professors. And they're going to ask them what their political persuasion is. They won't say what they're going to do with the survey. They won't guarantee that it will be an anonymous piece of paper either. They just know that there's indoctrination going on somewhere in college in Florida, and they have to root it out by forcing students and staff to, by law, complete this survey on their political ideology. Now, I got to tell you, I live here in Florida, and trust me, there's no political ideology at like FIU or FAU or Florida. Okay, what they're not being indoctrinated; they're inebriated. The thing that you learn in Florida on campus is to party. So I don't even know what this is about, except that he needs to run for re-election. And he wants to be able to stand on a podium and scream indoctrination. This is really scary. This is very, very sick. But he's going to dictate what students will learn in Florida universities. I don't know how he's going to change it from learning how to party to something else. But this new Florida law forces universities to assess viewpoint diversity on campus every single year. And Ron DeSantis is threatening budget cuts to schools that don't measure up to his expectations. So their non-existent threat from the left is now met with a real threat from the right.
Things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Okay, yesterday during an Armed Services Committee hearing, this happened.
They say that your stand down regarding extremism did not help our military, it hurt the military. And I want to share with you that perspective, that it caused service members to otherize one another. It impaired group cohesion. And interesting to me is that I've heard those sentiments most frequently from units that are majority minority, that this was not particularly helpful. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to maybe share with us more specificity regarding the definitions that seem to be a challenge when Ms. Hartzler was asking questions. How should the Department of Defense think about critical race theory?
Could I make a comment, Secretary? I'm sorry.
Well, I'm very limited on my time, General Milley.
Well, I just want to make a comment that the feedback
I know, but
I've
asked the question to Secretary Austin.
I don't know what the issue of critical race theory is and what the relevance here with the department. We do not teach critical race theory. We don't embrace critical race theory, and I think that's a spurious conversation. And so we are focused on extremist behaviors, and not ideology, not people's thoughts, not people's political orientation. Behaviors is what we're focused on. And one final point, and thanks for your anecdotal input, but I would say that I have gotten 10 times that amount of input, 50 times that amount of input on the other side that have said, hey, we're glad to have had the ability to have a conversation with ourselves and with our leadership.
So that's the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, telling Matt Gaetz, what the hell has critical race theory got to do with being Secretary of Defense or running the armed services, or why are you asking? And then the Joint Chiefs, Mark Milley, who has really come a long way since he had to apologize for being co-opted to march on Lafayette Square with Donald Trump in order to give Trump the illusion of credibility wearing his camo uniform. He wanted to answer that question, and he wanted to answer it because Matt Gaetz directed it to him. And here was his answer to Matt Gaetz.
First of all, on the issue of critical race theory, et cetera, I'll obviously have to get much smarter on whatever the theory is. But I do think it's important, actually, for those of us in uniform to be open-minded and be widely read. And the United States Military Academy is a university. And it is important that we train and we understand. And I want to understand white rage, and I'm white, and I want to understand it. So what is it that caused thousands of people to assault this building and try to overturn the Constitution of the United States of America? What caused that? I want to find that out. I want to maintain an open mind here, and I do want to analyze it. It's important that we understand that because our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians, they come from the American people. So it is important that the leaders, now and in the future, do understand it. I've read Mao Zedong. I've read Karl Marx. I've read Lenin. That doesn't make me a communist. So what is wrong with understanding, having some situational understanding about the country for which we are here to defend? And I personally find it offensive that we are accusing the United States military, our general officers, our commissioned, non-commissioned officers, of being, quote, woke or something else because we're studying some theories that are out there. That was started at Harvard Law School years ago, and it proposed that there were laws in the United States, antebellum laws prior to the Civil War, that led to a power differential with African Americans that were 3/4 of a human being when this country was formed. And then we had a Civil War and Emancipation Proclamation to change it. And we brought it up to the Civil Rights Act in 1964. It took another 100 years to change that. So look, I do want to know. And I respect your service, and you and I are both Green Berets. But I want to know. And it matters to our military and the discipline and cohesion of this military.
Okay, so when he says you and I are both Green Berets, he's actually directing that comment to Representative Michael Waltz, who is from Florida and a former Green Beret. I believe he's a National Guardsman. But anyway, the wokeness. So for those of us who served in the military, yes, we get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. We're woke. We get more done before 5 a.m. than most people do all day. Remember that commercial? Remember that? Yeah, and somehow we're supposed to go to sleep. Somehow we're supposed to not understand the country that we protect and defend and serve. That is ridiculous. But you know where he lost Matt Gaetz? When he said he read. When he said he read. Not just that he read Mao Zedong or any of that. No, just that he read. Just that. That was the smirk on Matt Gaetz's face. But the smirk on Matt Gaetz's face is Matt Gaetz's face. And you know, if Matt Gaetz was in the military, why he's on the Armed Services Committee, I have no earthly idea. But if he was in the military and we had to depend on the smirky Matt Gaetz to defend our country, we'd all be speaking whatever Matt Gaetz speaks. Whatever snide language Matt Gaetz speaks. I mean, this is so unbelievable. Mark Milley actually said, I want to understand white rage. I'm white. Well, if you want, you had the best vantage point in the entire history of the United States sitting away, just across from Matt Gaetz. He is the embodiment of white rage. A study of law, the only law Matt Gaetz is against is the one that's going to put him in jail. Okay? That's what Matt Gaetz is about when it comes to the law. You want to know why those insurrectionists went into the Capitol, General? If I could just speak to you for a brief moment. They were duped. They were duped, just like you were duped into walking to Lafayette Square with him. They were duped, and you know that. And stop telling the Republicans you read books. That's what makes you a communist. But that was an amazing hearing yesterday, and it was supposed to be just, just a hearing. Nobody was paying any attention to it. And then all of a sudden, idiot boy Matt Gaetz starts asking questions about critical race theory. Why? Because Steve Bannon and the Heritage Foundation and American Crossroads and even the Club for Growth, Grover Norquist's anti-tax group, they all are now putting out pamphlets and talking points instructing members of the Republican persuasion to go out and campaign against critical race theory to get reelected in 2022. They live in an unreal world. They live in a place where they make up threats and then create actual threats to freedom of thought by threatening to withhold funding for public universities here in Florida if you don't complete the survey on your political thoughts. Holy crap, man. What is with these people? And how in the world do crazy Republican voters believe that the Republicans are about freedom? They just refuse to secure your right to vote. Now they're getting into your political thoughts, not even your political actions, your thoughts, and threatening to withhold money.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
Here's Marsha Blackburn.
You're hearing a lot about critical race theory. So what is it? This is a form of teaching that teaches our kids that America is systemically racist and that you're either an oppressor or a victim, and judge a person by the color of their skin, not the content of their character.
Oh, good God. Marsha Blackburn is quoting Martin Luther King to make a point that we're teaching children to hate themselves. This is all a money grab. That's why if they're going to talk about it 1,300 times in less than 100 days, you know that this is a talking point. You know that this came from a think tank. You know that this is a money grab and that this is all about winning an election based on agitation, outrage, and a machine that constantly cranks that stuff out instead of focusing on real issues like climate change, like infrastructure, like violent crime, like mentoring, like poverty, like, substandard buildings. I mean, yes, I see the building that, collapsed here in Miami. Obviously, I see it. I just can't cover it because I don't know what happened. Do you? No. But they'll cover it. They'll cover it. They'll say that it was a critical race theory, overload or something that brought the bill. I mean, honestly, they just make crap up. They just make it up. They just invent things to be outraged about and then come up with policies to address the unreal situation that actually impedes your ability to think. I mean, that's what Ron DeSantis is doing, banning something that doesn't exist, and now dictating what students will learn in Florida universities by taking a survey of their political ideology and threatening to withhold money if schools don't measure up to his expectations. Again, the non-existent news on the right about something that isn't being taught to your children in school is forcing a threat from them on your ability to think. He said, this is his quote. This is Ron DeSantis, Ron death sentence. He said, quote, "We want our universities to be focused on critical thinking and academic rigor." That's what critical race theory is. I will tell you this. People can think a lot of things when they hear the words critical thinking and academic rigor, but Ron DeSantis is not one of them. Nobody capable of critical thinking could walk into a polling place and vote for Ron DeSantis. But that's what goes on. They create these environments of threat all the time. And then they try to solve the non-existent threat by actually threatening you. So their solution to, listen, when they built up the Tea Party in opposition to healthcare, that's what Obamacare was. It was an exchange that you could go on and compare different companies' healthcare plans. They were categorized in metals. Remember? They still are. I know because I have Obamacare. You could buy a bronze plan. You could buy a silver plan. You could buy a gold plan. You could buy a platinum plan. Maybe you can. I can't. I have a bronze plan. That's what I can afford. But anyway, and that somehow was an attack on your freedom. And it was Barack Obama doing it to you. And it got so racial that they had to put a bone through his nose and depict him as a witch doctor. They had to say that they were throwing our seniors off of Medicare or some such crap. And they had death panels. Remember all this? Death panels where your grandmother or your mother or you were going to be thrown off a cliff because it was too expensive to keep you alive. I mean, this lunacy that all grew out of Heritage Foundation and American Crossroads and the Tea Party groups, American Patriot groups, all of this outrage manufactured in order to win a midterm election. And now they're doing it by inventing something that is 40 years old, that only exists in graduate school as a voluntary course of study, is somehow being foisted on your children. So either attack grandma and her ability to stay alive, or attack your children to try and appeal to white suburban women. Wow. This is, and it's going to happen, and it's going to stay with us. I mean, this is just something that, Texas just banned critical race theory from being taught in their schools. Florida banned critical race theory from being taught. And it isn't. It isn't. This is all about money. This is all about financing radical right-wing liars by creating outrage and agitation and lies and make something that's false a commonly held belief. That is what they do. Google searches, ever since Fox started reporting falsely that critical race theory is being taught to your children, Google searches have skyrocketed. Skyrocketed. It is so amazing that people, whatever happened to that expression, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me? I mean, people get fooled over and over and over and over and over in this country by the same perpetrators, the same money think tanks, the same right-wing lunatics, the Club for Growth, Heritage Foundation, American Crossroads, the Dick Armey's group, all of these Tea Party remnants, all of them. Texas is the 5th state that passed a law banning critical race theory from being taught in school. I'll give you the name of these people that are responsible for this, okay? So, as you know, it's this guy, what's his name? Ian, what I say his name was? He's the guy that that is from Loudoun County and started this mess in Loudoun County. Okay, he's an ex-Trump administration employee. Steve Bannon, ex-Trump employee, right? Ex-Trump administration employee. Jessica Anderson, she didn't work for the Trump administration, but she is the executive director of the Heritage Foundation's advocacy arm. And she actually said, she told Politico that critical race theory is one of the top 2 issues for her group. for heritage action. The other is to suppress the vote, tighten voting laws. So they have two issues over at Heritage, okay? And that's Koch brothers money. Two issues, suppressing the vote and generating outrage over something that isn't happening. They put a pamphlet out, and everybody's reading from these talking points. That's why they're all saying the same thing.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
Pryor. Ian Pryor. Okay, these people all worked for Donald Trump's administration. Ian Pryor worked in the Trump administration. Chris Rufo worked in the Trump administration. Obviously, Steve Bannon worked in the Trump administration, okay? And the Heritage Foundation is married to Republican legislators, okay? I mean, and it is Jessica Anderson, the executive director of the Heritage Foundation's advocacy arm, Heritage Action, said that they are prioritizing the teaching of critical race theory right alongside voter suppression as their number one and number two issues for the 2022 midterms in order to agitate and outrage people. The big lie that lost Rudy Giuliani his law license today, okay, the big lie is top of mind for the Heritage Foundation, and critical race theory is top of mind for the Republican effort to generate another Tea Party bullcrap outrage machine. These are factories. And what they make is anger. What they make is hatred. What they make is outrage. And they just sell it to Republican voters at school board meetings. Before that, it was, the Tea Party thing. It's so sick. North Carolina's GOP just had their annual convention. They were told to bring up critical race theory. Oh, and scream that they were all for a ban on it. 40 years old, this look at the law has been studied in grad schools, right? That's what it is. And people rose to their feet and started screaming in support of banning it. And Steve Bannon said this: I look at this and I say, hey, this is how we're going to win. I see 50 House Republican seats in 2022. Keep this up. I think you're going to see a lot more emphasis on critical race theory from Trump. DeSantis is on it, and others. People who are serious for 2024 and beyond are going to focus on it. And that is why we need to nip it in the bud. That is why we need to put a pin in it now. Chip Roy in Texas, Dan Bishop in North Carolina, they all introduced bills to ban the teaching of something that isn't taught. Oh my God. All right, so let me show you who Chris Rufo is. Okay, they're in the homework 2 days ago. Very nice, long article explaining who Chris Rufo is. Yesterday, we showed you Ian Pryor. Ian Pryor in Loudoun, Virginia, started this whole massive, disrespectful behavior by grown-ass adults at the Loudoun County School Board meeting. 2 people got arrested. It was so disrespectful. They were alleging things that weren't true and accusing the school board of doing things they weren't doing, like teaching things that they don't teach, and got themselves all worked up. And, they had very professional signs, just like the Tea Party. These were not homemade signs that you make on, discarded Amazon boxes. No, these were professionally printed, obviously well-funded signs that were distributed to these parents ahead of a meeting. I mean, it's such a game. It's such a game. And now they're playing with parents. parents of children and grandparents, because the people that I saw get arrested, they were old stinking white men. But anyway, Joy Reid decided to invite Chris Rufo, who thinks he can beat her in a debate. But you know what? You know what she brought? She brought his Twitter account and put it on the screen. And a lot of us who, you know, do tweet were retweeting him a couple days ago because he was telling the core activists who were going to pretend this was real to keep pretending it was real. His tweet said, "I agree with you. The activists are realizing that their ideas, once put into practice, are generating discontent. The racial coalition is breaking apart. Asian Americans in particular are revolting against CRT. We have successfully frozen their brand, critical race theory, into the public conversation. We are steadily driving up negative perceptions. We will eventually turn it toxic as we put all of the various cultural insanities under that brand's category." Okay, so Joy Reid had all of his tweets and read them to him.
Then you said we have successfully frozen their brand, critical race theory, into the public conversation and are steadily driving up negative perceptions. We will eventually turn it toxic as we put all the various cultural insanities under that brand category. The goal is to have the public read something crazy in the newspaper and immediately think critical race theory. We have decodified the term and will recodify it to annex the entire range of cultural constructions that are unpopular with Americans. Aren't you just taking wokeness stuff that annoys you and calling it critical race theory?
No, not at all. The idea of the codification and decodification of language comes from the critical pedagogist Paulo Freire. And my strategy is to take these...
Now you're doing pedagogy, Christopher?
Yes. To take these techniques and use them against their own ideology. And I'll tell you, Joy, my strategy has been enormously successful. According to The Economist magazine poll, 64% of Americans now know what critical race theory is.
No, they know what Christopher Rufo theory is.
Of which 58% of them
you made up your own thing, bro. You made, my friend, you made up your own thing. You admitted you were going to do it. And I'm going to give you credit for one thing. You did create your own thing. Not a lot of guys in their 30s have created their own thing, labeled it something that already existed as a name, slapped that brand name on it, and turned it into a successful political strategy. You've done that. It's creating a lot of hell at school board meetings, but you did accomplish that. So, Christopher Rufo, thank you, man.
She was extraordinarily polite to him. The man has taken something and turned it toxic on purpose in order to make 64% of Americans believe what he's saying critical race theory is, but it isn't. All for money. All for money. They work for the Heritage Foundation. They work for American Crossroads. They work for Heritage Action. They work for Club for Growth, okay, Grover Norquist's anti-tax group. And they've all put out these talking points. I want to show you what talking points look like, okay, on a different issue because, you know, I was going to play you Lauren Boebert calling for Joe Biden to be censured for failing to keep America safe at the border or some such crap, right? Poor Lauren Boebert. She is like the poor man's Sarah Palin and a really bad Marjorie Taylor Greene. The poor man's Matt Gaetz. I don't know. And she is just dying for attention. So she had this stupid press conference yesterday. I swear to God, she went to, one of the rooms where there's TV cameras in the House of Representatives, and she called for the censure of Joe Biden.
I am proud to lead my colleagues in filing a bill to censure President Joe Biden for his dereliction of duty and failing to secure the southern homeland.
Poor thing. Okay, I just want to show you what the talking points actually sound like.
Crime, methamphetamine, border crisis, humanitarian crisis, crisis cartel,
illegal immigrants,
hundreds of people,
tens of thousands.
Hundreds of thousands that are coming. Tidal wave of illegal immigration.
That's what a talking point is. They all read off the same pamphlet. And they say the same damn words because they don't have very many words. And they're doing it now with our children as the pawns in their game. It was bad enough when they were using grandma and death panels. That's why I say, poor man Sarah Palin. Now they're all incensed because Kamala Harris, they said, she needs to go to the border. She can't just look at everything that's going on in Central America. She can't just go to Central America. She has to go to the border. She has to go to So she's going to the border. Oh, no, that's the wrong part of the border. Wrong part of the border. Listen. Orient yourself. Figure out the game. First of all, figure out the game. The game is talking points. The game is manufacturing rage. Outrage. Resentment. Anger. Because angry people, they think, vote for them. Our job? Solve problems. Solve them.
Mary had a little ram. The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon.
I have a dream.
Change has come to America. Believe me. Help is on the way.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
Oh, it's Friday, you bastards, but not just any Friday. Oh, no, oh, hell no. This is the day that Derek Chauvin finds out how long he will be cooling his heels in a prison somewhere in the United States of America. So the sentencing hearing for Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd is underway. We heard the victim impact statements earlier. The little baby girl, the little daughter of George Floyd, she spoke about how her dad's death affected her. We heard from the brother of George Floyd, Philenace Floyd. We heard from other family members. And now we're listening to Matthew Frank, the Minnesota Assistant Attorney General. And he's going over what he submitted to the court as sentencing recommendations in light of the fact that Derek Chauvin not only was found guilty of second-degree murder, which carries a penalty of up to 25 years. I'm sorry, 40 years. 40 years. 25 years for third-degree murder, that would be the top, and 10 years for manslaughter. He was found guilty on all those charges, as you will recall. Now, in addition to being found guilty on all of those charges, there are aggravating factors in play. Now, you'll remember that Derek Chauvin, his lawyer, poor Eric, decided that he didn't want the jury, who had just convicted his client of these 3 crimes, capital crimes, to decide the aggravating factor portion of the penalty phase, right? So he actually said on behalf of his client, Derek Chauvin, that he wants Judge Peter Cahill to review the evidence and find whether or not Derek Chauvin met the threshold of beyond a reasonable doubt with aggravating factors in play. Of those aggravating factors, and there were 5, Judge Peter Cahill found beyond a reasonable doubt that Derek Chauvin was guilty of 4. And those 4 aggravating factors were that he violated a position of trust as a police officer, that he acted with extreme cruelty when he nonchalantly stared into the face of a camera held by a 17-year-old woman and in the presence of a 9-year-old girl, put his hand in his pocket or on his hip or just nonchalantly stared down into a camera as if he were above the law and stood there for 9 minutes and 29 seconds in the cruelest manner. Also, that he committed this act in front of children, just went over that, and that he committed these crimes as part of a group. Now, you know that there were 3 other officers who haven't gone on trial yet. They will go on trial next March of 2022. I promise you that if the Judge Cahill, in this case, throws the book at Derek Chauvin, meaning 40 years for second-degree murder, 25 years for third-degree murder, and 10 years for manslaughter, they will all run concurrently, meaning that all those sentences go at the same time. So you only need to look at the top sentence, and then you'll know how long. But I predict that if Judge Cahill throws the book at Derek Chauvin, that these other 3 will leave skid marks to their lawyers' offices and beg for a plea deal. And that is another reason why this sentencing is so important. So important. All right, so right now, Matthew Frank has just concluded his explanation of his sentencing recommendation memo that he gave to Judge Peter Cahill. It is now my favorite time. It is time for poor Eric to stand up and defend the indefensible. The first thing he'll do, and he is doing right now, is putting Derek Chauvin's mom in front of the judge. So this is Carolyn Palenti. This is Derek Chauvin's mother.
19 years of his life to the Minneapolis Police Department. It has been difficult for me to hear and read what the media, public, and prosecution team believe Derek to be an aggressive, heartless, and uncaring person. I can tell you that is far from the truth. My son's identity has also been reduced to that as a racist. I want this court to know that none of these things are true and that my son is a good man. Derek always dedicated his life and time to the police department. Even on his days off, he would call in to see if they needed help. Derek is a quiet, thoughtful, honorable, and selfless man. He has a big heart, and he always has put others before his own. The public will never know the loving and caring man he is, but his family does. Even though I have not spoken publicly, I have always supported him 100% and always will. Derek has played over and over in his head the events of that day. I've seen the toll it has taken on him. I believe a lengthy sentence will not serve Derek well. When you sentence my son, you will also be sentencing me. I will not be able to see Derek, talk to him on the phone, or give him our special hug. Plus the fact that when he is released, his father and I most likely will not be here. Derek, my happiest moment is when I gave birth to you. And my second is when I was honored to pin your police badge on you. I remember you whispering to me, "Don't stick me with it." Derek, I want you to know I have always believed in your innocence, and I will never waver from that. I have read numerous letters from people around the world that also believe in your innocence.
Oh, dear God.
No matter where you go, where you are, I will always be there to visit you.
Oh, boy. A mother's love. Pretty unbelievable, isn't it? He's a caring murderer. He's a loving boy. Well, they'll find out just how loving he is in prison. Mom, sorry. Your son committed murder on videotape. He's played it over in his head over and over again. We've seen it on television. Judge Peter Cahill has seen it on videotape hundreds of times. He's innocent.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Oh, poor Eric. He has the world's worst clients. He has tried everything, including blaming George Floyd for his own death. He has accused, the community of, supporting Derek Chauvin. He has brought his mother to read a very poorly crafted statement, I must say. I get a mother's love. I really do. But for her to stand there and say, I believe in my son's innocence in front of a judge who not only heard from a jury that he was guilty of all the charges that were presented against him in the murder of George Floyd, but also found beyond a reasonable doubt, the judge himself did, that Derek Chauvin was guilty of 4 of the 5 possible aggravating factors that would contribute to a stiffer sentence for her son. I mean, she should have stood up there and said, I need to understand why my son is so angry. The Derek I knew was X, but the one that I saw on that videotape, you know what I mean? And then you make a claim that prison isn't going to help him. He needs professional anger management or whatever it is you're going to argue. Holy crap. Poor Eric did not go over Miss Palenti's, impact statement very well. Now, did he? No, he did not. And in fact, he's now invoking some website that he set up. Poor Eric Nelson, the defense attorney with the world's worst client. Derek Chauvin. He's saying that he got over 1,000 responses on a community website that he set up. That said that they believe that, the murder of George Floyd was something that Derek Chauvin was correct in doing. That he had applied the right amount of force for a handcuffed man, prone on his face, on the ground, by kneeling on his neck and choking him to death with his knee for 9 minutes and 29 seconds while staring into a camera. Wow. That's really quite a website you got going there. But, he, like I said, has the world's hardest client.
Told me that he was a solid police officer, that he did his job, that if somebody asked him to do a particular task, he never complained, he did it. One person told me that one of his sergeants told me that if I had asked him to dig a ditch for 8 hours, he would have picked up a shovel and he would have never complained for a second. He would have done his job. He was decorated as a police officer. Multiple life-saving awards.
Okay.
He was decorated.
I'm sorry.
For valor.
I can't. Because, Derek Chauvin is facing additional charges in another unrelated matter. A 17-year-old has brought charges for, abuse of authority and use of force against him. And he's obviously facing a civil rights case for violating George Floyd's constitutional right to live. So I don't want to hear how he's decorated, do you? Because if you do, I'll play it. I will play it. But I just don't really need to go through his awesome, awesome career, which included 19 other abuse of force complaints against him. I really don't need to hear how he was decorated for that. It's not helping. All right, Ronnie in California.
Randy, hello. I'm an Air Force man as you are, but I want to get right to the point about this sentencing. And I was reminded by your screener of your previous statement, and it helped me be more succinct. Specifically, I was going to say too light would be similar to what happened with the young lady in Los Angeles, LaTosha Harlins, over the orange juice, where she was given probation from the shooting from Mrs. June Doe. And what is considered too light when you consider what has taken place with Black Lives Matter over the last summer? They're not going to accept it.
So I had this conversation with Brett before the show, because when he came into work today, I asked him, what do you think, the sentences?
Yeah, he shared that with me.
Yeah, we had a conversation about it, and I ran him through the aggravating factors and reminded him, that increases the ability for the judge to, give a stiffer penalty. And we were talking about, like whether or not the judge needs to throw the book at Derek Chauvin. And I can't think of anything I've ever seen in all my life covering news stories that was more offensive, that was crueler, that was lower, that was...
I concur.
And so if ever there was a case where 40 years was due, it would be this one. And not because, and I told him this too, I don't think Peter Cahill, although he's a human being, gets to consider whether or not Black Lives Matter will be happy or not with whatever he gives Derek Chauvin as penalty, as times, to go to jail. But
right, and thank you for getting me back on track.
Right, but what I want to see, what I personally want to see is he's 42, and I wanted to, throw that out there too. He's 42, and I don't want to see him do 10 years in jail, come out at 52, and go back into some police force somewhere in the United States. He's got to be in jail until he's 65 years old.
Yes, or he'll be a commentator on Fox News.
Right, exactly.
A martyr.
Yes, he will.
Spot on.
Right. So that was that was a conversation that we had.
Yeah. Now you and Brett had to grapple with that, and I was grappling with the 40 years because that's what I believe. If there's ever a time in history, okay, I'm talking regardless of the Detroit riots and all that, and what happened in the uprisings in Los Angeles, this is paramount, and it appears that you agree. What was Brett's opinion?
So Brett thinks that he's going to get a low end of the 40 years, and after we first he said 10 years, and then after we talked it through and I told him about the aggravating factors, because everybody forgot, which is why I opened with it, to remind you that the judge had found that 4 of the 5 aggravating factors beyond a reasonable doubt had been proven, that he should, that 40 years of the 40 years, that allows the judge to do 20 or 30, you know what I'm saying? And so...
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so Brett was like saying 12. He thinks 12. And
Will not cut it.
And that's what I'm saying.
And we're back in the streets again.
Well, I'm not even thinking about the effect. I'm thinking about justice and what he earned himself. And Derek Chauvin earned himself 40 years. He did. He earned himself 40 years. He's been convicted of second-degree murder, which carries a penalty in Minnesota of 40 years, up to 40 years, with 4 of the 5 aggravating factors present, and videotape where he's, the look on his face, the absolute...
Under the color of law.
Nonchalant, like, in your face... You can't touch me. Just the attitude of this man as he's killing another man in front of children. Sorry, but that's 40 years for me.
If I can jump in real quick and just say, my aggravating factor is the knee on the neck with that look. That
look, yeah.
Call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
All right, so the court, Peter Cahill's court, is in recess for 15 minutes. He said he needed to take in everything that he had heard this morning and he will then prepare his sentencing memo, and he will read it to the defendant. He will read it to Derek Chauvin, and Derek Chauvin will find out just how long he's going to spend in the cooler. If there's anything that Judge Peter Cahill ought to take back with him into his chambers, it would be this.
We used to have dinner meals every single night before we went to bed. My daddy always used to help me brush my teeth.
Oh. Do you miss him helping brush your teeth?
Yes.
How do you hope that the world remembers him?
Well, they help him because those mean people did something to him.
Yeah. If you could say anything to your daddy right now, what would it be?
It would be, I miss you and I love you.
Judge Peter Cahill, I thank you for allowing me to share this today. George's life mattered. So my family and I, most of all, my niece, Gianna. My niece, Gianna, she needs closure. I'm asking that you please find it suitable to give Officer Chauvin the maximum sentence possible.
The maximum sentence possible is 40 years. That is the maximum sentence possible for second-degree murder, which Derek Chauvin has received a free and fair trial by a jury of his peers, and he was convicted of that crime. He was convicted of many crimes, as you know. All of the crimes that he was charged with, he was convicted of, and then, in a smooth move, poor Eric said, I don't want the jury to deal with the aggravating factors. Remember we had the Blakely hearing? Yeah, that was when you have a decision to make. Do you want the jury to decide whether or not you've proven aggravating factors should play into your sentencing, or would you like the judge to do it? And Derek Chauvin and poor Eric chose the judge to do it. And the judge found beyond a reasonable doubt that 4 of the aggravating factors had been proven. And those aggravating factors were excessive cruelty, which is that look on that face and that knee on that neck for a man who was subdued and in complete custody of a police officer and posed no threat whatsoever at all to that police officer. And in spite of that, the police officer decided to stare into a camera that was being held by a 17-year-old teenage girl who knew something was so bizarre about this, what she was seeing, that she filmed the whole thing, and thank God she did. You know, she was not nominated for a Pulitzer Prize, but she was given a special shout-out, let's say, by the Pulitzer Prize Committee for her work in documenting this cruel and unusual death. Let's hope it's unusual going forward, okay? Also, the abuse of his authority, right? That was an aggravating factor, that he was a police officer who is trusted to help people, okay, who is called by the public when they need help, and that the public needs to be able to trust that when they do call the police for help, that is what they will get. The judge found that he abused that power of trust and authority in his police uniform that day, and that it aggravates the community because the community then turns away from doing things like calling the police for help or relying on the police to give medical attention to those that are in their care, their custody. So that was another one. And then, of course, not only was this cruelty played on videotape, not only was it captured on videotape, the look on his face, I agree with you, that for me is why he deserves the maximum sentence of 40 years. But that he did it in front of children, who, for the rest of their lives, will carry with them that they witnessed the murder of a man on the sidewalk outside of a food store in Minneapolis, that trauma will be with them for the rest of their lives. And one of those kids was only 9 years old. The other one, obviously, the 17-year-old girl. So that's an aggravating factor. And then, of course, the fact that he had all this backup with him, okay? There were 3 other cops who were stationed further down George Floyd's body, okay? And there was a cop across the street, too, that I didn't realize until the trial actually was well underway, that there was a police officer across the street. And that police officer was never asked to come and help because there was no reason that those 4 needed any additional help. And so the 4 of them did this crime together. And when you commit crime like that, when you commit a murder in a group, that's considered an aggravating factor. So all of those, the cruelty, though, is the part that I think Americans of good faith, Americans who are real with themselves and others, Americans who can say what they saw, articulate what they saw in a nonpartisan, let's say, fashion, we all know that that was just the cruelest, almost 10 minutes of snuff movie that we have ever seen. Ever. Vincent in Nevada.
Yeah, hi, Randy. Love you so much.
Thank you.
I think the minimum and what might be given is about 25 years. That's the minimum acceptable that I think. Just wanted to put that out. Wondering what you thought about that.
40 years is what I think. But, you know, like I said, this is such a unique case in that it was done in front of children, in that it was done with 3 other police officers, in that it was done with such cruelty and such nonchalance. I mean, arrogance was what you saw on that man's face, complete. And that other officer, Tao, who stood there with his arms crossed like he was a bodyguard at some club. Yeah. Holy crap, man. And the other reason, I think, is this needs to be an example to every other police officer that serves, that this is what happens now. People will videotape you. You will get 40 years. You will never get out of prison. And the other 3 need to enter into plea deals right now and spare us of the heinous nature of 3 more trials.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I didn't think you had just mentioned about the kids, that the actual kids witnessed that.
Yes.
That should be an aggravating factor.
It is.
I had not thought about that.
Well, that is what, the aggravating factors are. Particular cruelty, did it in front of children, as a group, and abuse of his position of trust and authority. You know, we give police officers an amazing amount of authority over us, right? There should be an enormous amount of responsibility, too.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
All right, we're in a recess in a courtroom in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where Judge Peter Cahill has the responsibility to sentence Derek Chauvin appropriately, considering the aggravating factors and the videotaped evidence, and a guilty verdict on all charges, second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and manslaughter, with 4 aggravating factors proven beyond a reasonable doubt. So we're waiting to see what that actually looks like. Pat in New Mexico.
Hey, I'm just a little bit beside myself. I'm kind of like here, just kind of a little confused because you have this self-professed outrage against Derek Chauvin and for George Floyd, and yet, as is well documented, you've been a Bernie bro for a long time, maybe a lifetime. I wondered if you know how old Bernie is, and if you feel like maybe, like for one example, maybe more than James Comey, that Bernie gave us Trump, which gave us Gorsuch, which gave us Kavanaugh, which gave us Phony Barrett. And I wondered if you had any kind of self-awareness about that, and if you ever saw the irony.
Chauvin, Derek Chauvin, is what we're talking about.
Yeah, Chauvin, I think you could connect the dots. You claim to be like someone, even though you didn't get out of high school, that maybe you were a law school candidate. I know there's a little bit of a stretch there, or maybe there's like
a little bit of a stretch. You're like playing Twister at the Olympic level here. What the hell is going on?
I know. You can't even get out of high school,
right?
And you think that you're a law school candidate. I mean, you talk about it, right? You talk about it. You say that you should be a lawyer like your boy, the Howard.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So connecting the dots, you should be able to move with me, huh? So you think, so my confusion is you support.
What is your confusion? What is that drug you're snorting, drinking, smoking, shooting? What is this with you? What are you doing?
Well, I was trying to downgrade my intellect so that you could have some understanding. I'm not shocked that you can't. Here's the thing, Randy. You wanna say that Derek Chauvin should get 40 years.
Yes.
And surely he should.
Oh, good.
But right? But
why is there
in your world?
Why is there a but? Why is there a but? Why is there a but?
In your world, you bring us Donald Trump by your Bernie bro support.
I voted for Hillary. All right.
Okay, that's really swell. You should be so proud, right?
What do you want from me here? I'm not really sure where you're going or what's wrong with you, but you could tell me.
No. Okay, Randy. Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
In the primary, did you support Bernie Sanders?
Yes.
Did Bernie Sanders announce a desire to primary President Barack Obama?
Bernie Sanders lost the primary. I voted for Hillary Clinton.
No, I'm talking about 2012.
What does that have to do with Derek Chauvin?
It has everything to do with it. Bernie bros are racist. You're a racist.
I'm a racist.
And Bernie's a racist.
I'm a racist. Okay, good. Thank you.
So can I just, can the black guy that works for you, you stinking racist, just say something real quick? One, he must have been the MAGA Riddler, because he was like, riddle me this, Randy. What does Derek Chauvin have to do with Bernie Sanders? And you failed, because nobody knows what he's talking about. And two, I think it's funny how your hate listeners, they know Howard. They know your education. They know where you live. They know the show. These hate listeners love you, Randy. They love you.
Well, it's a proven fact that people that hate you listen longer. So that is kind of the risk you run by being somebody who is, strident, let's just say, and fact-based, that it runs into the risk of alienating people to the point of hating you, but they do listen longer. So, it's kind of like a weird deal. It's a weird deal. But you, Pat, I didn't understand anything you were trying to say. Nothing. I am not responsible for Donald Trump winning the presidential election. Okay? There is no way that I contributed to Donald Trump being the 45th president of the United States. Not a chance, no matter how you sit there and spin your wheels, or what, far left crap you imbibe or ingest all day. There is no way, no connection to how I voted in the 2016 election to Donald Trump winning. You get that? I hope you get that. Hello?
Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
All right. How are you? Who are you?
I'm so glad it's Friday. There's so many trolls between
It's okay.
Free
It's okay.
Speech TV and the internet. But
it's
anyway.
fine. It's fine because they make no sense. And the more that you understand that they make no sense, the more that you understand that they think weird stuff based on nothing, the better off we are as a nation. So
yeah, like Susan B. Anthony says, though, organize, agitate, educate.
Yeah.
And having trolls just makes us do that more.
It does.
My reason for calling,
okay, go ahead.
My reason for calling is that I'm going to help the Democrats with some rallying cries and help them push the talking points by saying, if those were a list
I gotta
of people
go.
that
Let
you
me
were
jump.
naming off,
I gotta jump because he's sentencing him right now. Okay. I want to listen in. This is Judge Peter Cahill.
What the case is, or what the sentence is not based on, is emotion.
Told you.
Or sympathy. But at the same time, I want to acknowledge the deep and tremendous pain that all the families are feeling, especially the Floyd family. You have our sympathies. And I acknowledge and hear the pain that you are feeling. I acknowledge the pain not only of those in this courtroom, but the Floyd family who are outside this courtroom and other members of the community. It has been painful throughout Hennepin County, throughout the state of Minnesota, and even the country. But most importantly, we need to recognize the pain of the Floyd family. I'm not going to attempt to be profound or clever, because it's not the appropriate time. I'm not basing my sentence also on public opinion. I'm not basing it on any attempt to send any messages. A trial court judge, the job of a trial court judge is to apply the law to specific facts and to deal with individual cases. And so, Mr. Chauvin, as to count 1, based on the verdict of the jury finding you guilty of unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony under Minnesota Statute 609.19 subdivision 2 paren 1, it is the judgment of the court that you now stand convicted of that offense. Pursuant to Minnesota Statute section 609.04, counts 2 and 3 will remain unadjudicated as they are lesser offenses of count 1. As sentenced for count 1, the court commits you to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections for a period of 270 months. That's 270. That is a 10-year addition to the presumptive sentence of 150 months. This is based on your abuse of a position of trust and authority, and also the particular cruelty shown to George Floyd. You are granted credit for 199 days already served. Pay the mandatory surcharge of $78 to be paid from prison wages. You're prohibited from possessing firearms, ammunition, or explosives for the remainder of your life. Provide a DNA sample as required by law. Register as a predatory offender as required by law. And then you will receive a copy of the order and also the attached memorandum explaining the court's analysis. Anything further from the state?
If this needs to be said, we just ask that it be executed forthwith.
Defendant is remanded to the custody of the sheriff to be transported back to the DOC or...
Okay, that's 22 and a half years, 270 months, 22 and a half years. So 42, 52, 62. He'll be 65. Something tells me Peter Cahill is a very smart man. So there you have it. With the aggravating factors, adding 10 years to the minimum of 12 is 22 and a half years, 270 months. Bye-bye, Derek. Bye-bye. Don't let the door hit ya where the good Lord split ya.
So glad to say I was wrong.
See? I'm a high school dropout who should have been a law school candidate. Oh, my God.
Mary had a little lamb. The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon.
I have a dream.
Change has come to America.
Believe me. Help is on the way.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
Today, the Department of Justice is suing the state of Georgia. Our complaint alleges that recent changes to Georgia's election laws were enacted with the purpose of denying or abridging the right of black Georgians to vote on account of their race or color in violation of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Several studies show that Georgia experienced record voter turnout and participation rates in the 2020 election cycle. Approximately 2/3 of eligible voters in the state cast a ballot in the November election, just over the national average. This is cause for celebration. But then in March of 2021, Georgia's legislature passed SB 202. Many of that law's provisions make it harder for people to vote. The complaint alleges that the state enacted those restrictions with the purpose of denying or abridging the right to vote on account of race or color.
Well, that's one way around a filibuster, ain't it? That was Merrick Garland, the Attorney General of the United States, today announcing that the Department of Justice is suing the state of Georgia for taking away, well, it's just for voter suppression efforts that are directly related to the number of black voters that showed up in 2020 for Joe Biden. That is that, and everybody said, well, you know, they didn't want to pass the Voting Rights Act. They didn't want to pass the Senate. You know, they but they don't even do. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? That's one way around the filibuster. So the filibuster prevented the Senate from saving elections. But then, like one of the callers said, could we turn to the courts? Listen, I'm going to tell you this is a very slow process, just so you know. It feels very good to see Merrick Garland do something dramatic today. It feels good to know that the Biden administration is clearly aware of voter suppression in Georgia being directed at black voters on purpose, because the number of black voters that showed up in Georgia was cause for alarm for the Republicans. Of course, for us, it was cause for celebration. So it was good to hear, but let me tell you, the wheels of justice grind uber slowly. Uber slowly. So we do have a lawsuit now against Georgia. You would think that perhaps that lawsuit might be expedited, considering that we're going to have an election in 2022, and they've already passed this voter suppression bill, SB 202. Okay, so it's hard for me to feel confident that the courts will fix this. However, we did see Derek Chauvin today get 22 and a half years behind bars a year after George Floyd was murdered. So there's that. Kenyatta in L.A.
Hi, Randy. I wanted to say to you, I did, as respectfully as possible, want to correct you on something, and maybe it's not a correction, but you had spoken of the uniqueness of the George Floyd murder and the callous and craven manner in which Derek the chauvinist carried about his lynching and execution of this man. But I do want to let you know that what took place that day was in no way unique. What took place that day happens to black men and women in this country every single day, not always resulting in death, but psychological maiming that lasts a lifetime. So please don't be under the impression that this was somehow unique. As a matter of fact, had that camera not been there,
that's the point.
That young lady, had it not been there, Derek Chauvin would be at the strip club where he worked right now, prepared to do the same thing to some other black person. Well,
I apologize to you if I wasn't clear. What I was driving at in the unique comment was that we saw it on camera, that he stared into the camera with that look on his face, and that America got to see that. Because, you know, I've watched, Eric Garner get choked out many times, but I never saw anything like the arrogance that Derek Chauvin, displayed in front of, a 9-year-old girl, 17-year-old girl, and a camera. So that's the uniqueness. I mean, I watched, Philando Castile get shot in the head in front of a 4-year-old baby. I saw that. He did nothing. I've seen, Laquan McDonald spin around when he was walking away from the police. And the police lied and said, he was coming towards us with a knife, which was untrue. Right. A, he had no knife. B, he was walking away. So the unique part of the Derek Chauvin trial was the look on his face.
Well, and I agree that definitely the camera being there. But again, I want to reiterate that look is not unique. You can speak to any number of black people in this country that have had interactions with the police, and the level of disrespect, that look, that's not the first time I've seen that look. It's not. And I've been on both sides of the cuffs, Randy. I've placed them on people and I've had them placed on me. And so I can tell you that is not unique. Now, it may be unique for you, but it is a matter of fact for us. And let me say this to you. We just had the President of the United States mandate and sign a law that made Juneteenth a federal holiday. Yet, this is the country. I don't really care about that holiday, because if this country truly believes, as it says in its rhetoric, that our greatest sin, our original sin was slavery, why does it still refuse to apologize for it?
Yeah. No, I said, it wasn't an original thought. I stole it from D.L. Hughley, who said he said we asked for justice and we got a holiday, I thought it was kind of, lame too. He said, and then he compared it to getting something from Amazon, where you ordered something from Amazon, they sent you the wrong thing, but the thing that they sent you was really dope, he said. And so you kept that thing, which was the holiday, but you still went back and ordered what you originally ordered, which was justice, right? So that wasn't my original thought. I just thought it actually represented my thinking in the best way possible. So, yeah, I agree with that.
Enjoy your show, and be mindful, Randy. We still have the appellate process to go through, so the agony will continue.
No, what are they going to appeal?
They're lawyers. They get paid by the hour. You know that.
Oh, no.
High school dropout.
I am a high school dropout. I am. I actually am. I really did drop out of high school.
Well, I'll tell you what. You are a remarkable one, and if that's the case, I wish I had dropped out. So, anyways, listen. Thanks for the time, Randy.
Thank you. All right. So I wanted to tell you this, Kenyatta, but I let you go off the phone. I get emails about you. I swear to God, I get really nasty emails about you. I'll if you email me, I will send them to you so you can respond to the person who's sending them to me, because I don't get it. I really don't get it. But anyway, yes. So they asked for justice and got a holiday instead, is what D.L. Hughley said. And I thought it was exactly the way I felt. So I repeated it. But of course, you give credit to the big brain that thought of that. But the appeals process, can I just say what I think about that as a high school dropout? Can I just say what I think about that? I hope I can. So the appeals process in a criminal setting, which is what we have here, would only be to the procedure. It would only have to do if the judge procedurally erred, made a mistake, right? So I don't see an appeal happening in this particular case. I see Derek Chauvin rotting in jail until he's 65, which is what this high school dropout said would be the minimum for me. I wanted the whole 40, but the minimum was put him in jail till he's 65 years old, and that is what will happen. Now remember, he also has a constitutional civil rights claim pending.
All things Randy at RandyRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Our complaint today alleges that several provisions of SB 202 were passed with a discriminatory purpose in violation of the Voting Rights Act. The Georgia legislature passed SB 202 through a rushed process that departed from normal practice and procedure. The version of the bill that passed the state Senate on March 8th was 3 pages long. Days later, the bill ballooned into over 90 pages in the House. The House held less than 2 hours of floor debate on the newly inflated SB 202 before Governor Kemp signed it into law the same day. These legislative actions occurred at a time when the black population in Georgia continues to steadily increase.
So that's Kristen Clark. She's in charge of the Civil Rights Division over at DOJ. And you don't want to be like a Derek Chauvin with Kristen Clark at the head of the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Justice. That was her speaking about Georgia's suppression attempts to tamp down all this voting that's going on by black people in Georgia. So Republicans, as you know, at the state level are doing everything that they can to disenfranchise African-American voters, older voters, younger voters, Democratic voters. Everything that they could do. And, if Donald Trump was still in charge, his solution would be just shoot them. How do we know that? Well, there's a new book out. Yes, there's a new book out that... It's just frightening. It has conversations in it that apparently happened in the Oval Office between General Mark Milley, General Mark Milley, and Bill Barr, who was the former Attorney General of the United States, and Donald Trump. And Donald Trump was telling General Mark Milley that he wanted heads cracked open. He wanted protesters, the Black Lives Matter protesters, shot and killed. And when Bill Barr explained to the President of the United States that in order to do that, he would have to invoke the Insurrection Act, Donald Trump said, well, what does that do? And he said, well, it would put General Mark Milley in charge of the protests, meaning you would now be in charge of the protests. You would be in charge of the military acting against civilians who are protesting police brutality in front of their faces, captured on videotape across this here country. And Donald Trump said, well, Mark Milley told him, he pointed to a picture of Abraham Lincoln in Donald Trump's Oval Orifice, and said to him, sir, that man, Abraham Lincoln, had an insurrection. What you have is protests. Not the same thing. So Donald Trump was unwilling to invoke the Insurrection Act, but he said, that's how you're supposed to handle these people. Crack their skulls. Trump told his team he wanted the military to go in and, quote, beat the F, except he said it, out of the protesters. And then he said, just shoot them. And then when General Milley and Attorney General William Barr pushed back, he said, we'll shoot them in the leg or maybe in the foot, but be hard on them. And General Milley pointed at Abraham Lincoln and said, he had an insurrection. What you have is a protest. And Stephen Miller then chimed in. And Stephen Miller, the white supremacist, self-loathing Jew that he is, said that the scenes that he was watching on television made us look like a third world country. And he claimed that they weren't showing it, but American cities had been turned into war zones. Quote, these cities are burning. And General Milley then looked at Stephen Miller and said, shut the F up, Stephen. Shut the F up. And Milley apparently was particularly distressed about Donald Trump attacking the American people with use of the military, and was also upset with Donald Trump screaming about Mark Esper being bad and other Pentagon officials being bad, and offered and said to him, if you want to invoke the Insurrection Act in the face of civil unrest, you would be then invoking military force on the streets against civilians And you would then be taking control of the protests. You would be in charge of the protests. And that's when he said to him, that guy, Abraham Lincoln, had an insurrection. What we have, Mr. President, is a protest. This is why Fox News hates General Mark Milley. Not just because General Mark Milley testified at the Armed Services Committee in the face of Matt Gaetz's non-serviced life and, smirkiness, that he is interested in finding out why there is so much white rage in this country, what is actually fueling all this white rage in this country. Yes, he's interested in knowing the answer to that. And, of course, that met with complete and utter disdain from the Fox News punditry, to the point where Tucker Carlson decided that he would call General Mark Milley stupid and a pig.
Mark Milley is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He didn't get that job because he's brilliant or because he's brave or because the people who know him respect him. He is not, and they definitely don't. Milley got the job because he is obsequious. He knows who to suck up to, and he's more than happy to do it. Feed him a script, and he will read it. Hard to believe that man wears a uniform. He's that unimpressive. Notice he never defined white rage, and we should know what it is. What is white rage? He's not just a pig, he's stupid.
That's white rage, Tucker. You're like memeing yourself. You are the epitome of white rage. You're rich, you're Ivy League educated, you are privileged, you are heir to the Swanson frozen dinner fortune, and you're still pissed off. The epitome of white rage. And it wasn't just him, it was all of the Fox News idiots just trashing General Milley because General Milley stood in between using the military against civilians who have a just cause. Police brutality, police reform, equal justice under law. It is a just cause. And Mark Milley stood in the way of Donald Trump just shooting people, which is what Fox News would prefer.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
We are sending our tax dollars to this military to an attempt to weed out so-called extremists, which just means conservative evangelical, as far as I can tell. We're paying for that? Why is Congress not saying we're not going to give you a penny until all of this is eradicated from the military budget? Nothing. This is my offer to you. Nothing. That's what I would say.
You got to defund the CRT and the U.S. military at the very least. Push to cut the military budget, which a lot of the liberals used to be for, is totally different from the push to defund the police, because the left, they want to defund the police to dismantle it. We want to reduce and reorient military spending to save our military.
Oh, wow. This is really, really something. Laura Ingraham wants to defund the military. Defund the military. Holy crapola, man. That is amazing. We finally found what the conservatives are really all about. And what they're about is they're backstabbers, man. You do not want Laura Ingraham in your unit. You do not want Laura Ingraham in your squadron. You do not want Laura Ingraham in your battalion or your platoon. Laura Ingraham is the kind of wacky soldier that you don't really want to go into battle with, because she will spin around on her little kitten heel and stab you in the back when it's convenient. Wow. Talk about showing your true colors, Lala. Have another glass of wine. More wine, dear? Holy crap. Want some cheese to go with that wine? They want to defund the military because they hate General Mark Milley. That is amazing. So I'm telling you, the Republicans will turn on you on a dime. You know, they're pro-police until they think the police are actually enforcing laws they don't like insurrection, like attacking the Capitol, like bringing a freaking noose and a scaffold to the Capitol to hunt down and hang Mike Pence. And the Capitol Police put their lives on the line, go out there, literally get tased by this crowd, get bear sprayed by this crowd, get beaten by this crowd with skateboards and flagpoles and their own shields, okay, and sticks. And the Republicans literally turn on their police. They literally turn on them. And now they're doing it with the U.S. military, too. When they don't like you, they will backstab you. You do not want to go into battle with these Republicans. I'm so sorry, but they have absolutely no core principles. They have nothing that is of any value to them except for the actual emotion of outrage. That is it. That is what they care about. That is how they think they win elections. That is what they do. Voter suppression and an outrage machine. Holy crap. Oh my God. I couldn't believe it. I just, because I watched this swell. I have to watch it. And I'm like, they have talked about critical race theory 1,800 times now. 1,860 times they have brought up a graduate level course taught in law schools that is 40 years old. Okay, this course of study is 40 years old, and it looks at, after the civil rights era of justice reform in this country, after, the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act of 64, 65, in 1970, it decided to look at the effect that the previous discriminatory laws had on people of color in this country, right? That's what critical race theory is. It's a law school grad course that looks at discriminatory laws and their effects. They have talked about it 1,860 times in just the last 100 days, and every day they talk about it even more. And now they are so married to the outrage that they can generate by talking about a grad school course and misrepresenting it to parents, right? Insisting it's being taught to children, a grad school course, right? But they like the outrage so much that if it includes backstabbing the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, so be it. If it includes literally beating police officers to get your way, so be it. You do not want to go into battle with these people because they will turn on you. This is every soldier's nightmare, is to have to fight alongside a Laura Ingraham. This is every airman's nightmare, is to have to fly in a fighter jet along with Tucker Carlson. You're only as good as the weakest among you, okay? It's the weak link in the chain theory. And they are the weakest of the weak. They are the snowflakiest of the snowflakes. They are the most fragile of the fragile white people. There is nothing tough. There is nothing meaningful about them because they're not grounded by any value or principle that you would recognize. The air is rarefied in their little bubble. And trust me, they will turn on you as well. Just like they turned on the insurrectionists, right? The people that went and did the damage into the they don't cover them. They don't advocate for them. They just ignore them. They let them rot. They're on to the newest thing. Critical race theory. A graduate. Now, this girl went to Dartmouth. She knows this. And Tucker Carlson, by the way, you ever wonder where the insiders close to Trump, the anonymous sources, where they're... It's Tucker Carlson. It is. It's Tucker Carlson. He's on the phone all day talking to the press. All day talking to reporters, telling them about this thing and that thing and what Trump said and what Trump, was on the phone and what he was, alleging. And Tucker Carlson, he is that guy. He is that guy. And that's why the press doesn't go very hard on him, because they rely on him for information. It's a sick little twisted, mainstream media thing that goes on with him. Man, I tell you, they got nothing. They got nothing but voter suppression laws, and now the Department of Justice is going to sue the crap out of them. By the way, I have to tell you that after the federal, legislation failed, H.R. 1, S1 failed, right, because they filibustered it, all of a sudden Kansas passed a law that the Secretary of State of Kansas now needs approval from the legislature to settle an election lawsuit. Arkansas, they just gave the State Elections Commission the permission and power to investigate any aspect of any complaint that comes in about election irregularities without any limitation. Arizona, the Republican legislators wanted to weaken, they're trying to take away the authority of your Secretary of State, Katie Hobbs, so that she can't defend election lawsuits. They've limited her to hiring one lawyer on your behalf. Holy crap, man. They are trying to put the fix in every state, and that's why it is important that the DOJ moves against Georgia. But now, and they also said today at the end of the press conference, more to come if other states follow. They're following. It's all they got. Voter suppression and undo the election part.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
We are seeing a dramatic increase in menacing and violent threats, ranging from the highest administrators to volunteer poll workers. To address this effort to undermine our electoral process, today, the Deputy Attorney General will issue a directive to all federal prosecutors and the FBI, which will highlight the prevalence of these threats and instruct them to prioritize investigating these threats. Today, we will also launch a task force, including personnel from the Criminal Division, the Civil Rights Division, the National Security Division, and the FBI to focus on these threats. We will promptly prosecute any violations of federal law.
Can you believe this, Swell? This is what, the Republican media, this is what conservative media, this is what, uber right-wing media has done to this country. We're at the point now where the Department of Justice has to notify prosecutors in every single state about threats to election workers. Election workers! People who man the polling places, people who, oversee the voter rolls, people who register voters, people who, sit there and, give you your ballot at a polling place. Oh my God! Oh my God! And this is why it's so good that Rudy Giuliani will never see the inside of a court of law except as a defendant. Going forward, it's starting to happen where people are starting to be held accountable for their incitement of violence. Remember, Rudy stood there the night before the violence and said, "Trial by combat." Remember, Rudy went to court in Pennsylvania and lied to the court. Remember, Rudy went to Four Seasons Total Landscaping where his face literally melted into his hair. I don't even know what kind of biological thing that was, but the vampire, melted in the sun. And he was lying to the American people about fraud and lying to the American people about votes flipping and lying to the American people and getting them agitated and getting them outraged to the point where they showed up for a rally that the president had tweeted would be wild, and Rudy told them what that wildness should look like: trial by combat. And then they ended up beating the police officers that they love so much with their Blue Lives Matter flags. You don't want to be in this army of miscreants. You really don't want to go fight with them, because they will betray you, man. They will betray you. Rudy went on, for those of you who live without the psycho media, every once in a while you have to come outside of the bubble of reality, and you have to look at what they are doing over there and what they're saying over there. They interviewed Rudy yesterday after he lost his law license.
They are declaring right now that you are a threat. At this moment, you are an immediate threat to the public interest. You, Rudy Giuliani, just sitting there because you're not unifying behind Joe Biden. The country's being torn apart.
That's not why.
That's what they're citing. Yeah, the country is being torn apart because of cable news or whatever.
Well, I made all those statements, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Not a single one of them led to a protest, a riot, an incident, and anything. So obviously those statements do not have the impact of creating danger. These statements were made this is all after January 6th. If these statements are so darn dangerous, how come there hasn't been a protest, a riot?
This was all after?
The kind of thing we had last summer when the city was blowing up and the Democrats were doing nothing.
Okay, he's still lying. Okay, the premise of the question was a lie, number one. Okay, that Newsmax anchor, Kelly is his name. He wants Sean Hannity's gig so freaking bad that he's willing to literally kiss Rudy's ass and not correct him when Rudy says, there's been no incidents of violence. This all happened after January 6th. No, the appellate court in New York, 5 judges from the appellate division of the New York State Supreme Court, their first judicial department, unanimously suspended Rudy Giuliani's legal license pending disciplinary hearings for false claims he made about the election in November. Also, showing up at the Save America rally and saying trial by combat. That's why they said he is a danger to the profession of law. 5 judges concluded, quote, there is uncontroverted evidence that Giuliani communicated demonstrably false and misleading statements to courts, lawmakers, and the public at large in his capacity as lawyer for former President Donald J. Trump and the Trump campaign in connection with Trump's failed effort at re-election in 2020. This is not all after January 6th, and yet these so-called anchors just let him lie and say that there's no damage to American society if cable news allows lying liars to lie to the American people. When he says, oh, there was no violence. There was no violence. You know, first of all, I have to tell you, George Conway is a lawyer. So if you don't want to hear it from the high school dropout me, that's fine. But George Conway is a lawyer. And he laid out all of Rudy Giuliani's lies.
This isn't about who he was representing. This was about the lying, the incessant lying, saying that thousands of people voted in Georgia, dead people voted in Georgia, and in fact only 2 were found to have voted that way.
Trump voters.
Saying that thousands of underage voters in Georgia voted, and in fact there was a full audit in Georgia, and it was found that 0 people had voted.
0.
He lied to a court about the claims that were actually being litigated in the court. His client, the campaign, had withdrawn its claims of fraud, and yet Giuliani stood up before a federal judge and said, we're asserting these claims of fraud. And his co-counsel had to stand up and say, no, we're not. No, we're not. He lied to courts. He lied to the public. And in the context of how important and how significant and the poisonous effect of these lies, the court said that they had no choice but to suspend him even before having a full hearing.
So that's why they took away Rudy Giuliani's law license, in part. What you may not realize is Rudy only went to court one time representing Trump's fraud claim. That was in Pennsylvania. Rudy stood up for 30 minutes. Now, we didn't get to hear it. But Rudy stood up apparently for 30 minutes and claimed to the court in his argument that this was a claim of fraud, that this was a claim of a fraudulent election. And in fact, Rudy said it wasn't just Pennsylvania, it was national, widespread fraud committed by mayors and governors across this here country. He also asserted to the court that more absentee ballots came in during the election then were sent out before the election. And none of that was true, and the court found that none of that was true, and the court challenged Rudy on these facts. And when he was challenged on the facts after a 30-minute tirade, a 30-minute argument to the court about why they were there, he then said, oh, no, we're not alleging fraud. We're not alleging fraud. And that's because his co-counsel said, we're not alleging fraud. We're not alleging fraud. We have no proof of fraud. There is no proof of fraud. But what the 5-judge panel found was that Rudy's claim and his mischaracterization of the case, he said it was just a passing mistake. These 5 judges heard his argument, and they said it was not simply a passing mistake or an inadvertent reference. Fraud was the crown of his personal argument before the court that day. His allegation of widespread, nationwide voter fraud, of which this is a part, is the claim he persisted in making. And when the court pressed him to prove any of this, he claimed that he, a member of his team, inadvertently took the information from a website. And he also asserted to the court that Joe Frazier, who's dead, voted in 2020. And Rudy said he got that off of a blog, and the blog got that wrong. Because Joe Frazier's been dead for more than 5 years, and Rudy said, oh, he died 5 years ago? Oh, I got that off a blog. Hollow. Very hollow, everybody. Have a good weekend. Stay cool in Seattle. Oh, my God.